Hi, this is Chris Dixon. This is the a16z podcast. I'm here with Christina Mercando, who's the co-founder and CEO of Ringly, which is a wearable computing company, and we're going to talk about wearable computing today. So, hi, Christina.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks. So, what do you think is exciting now? I mean, people are excited about the, Apple, of course, is rumored to be coming out with a watch. Samsung has had a watch. Google made a lot of announcements around Google Now. You obviously are working on jewelry. It seems like a very exciting time in wearables, and so, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what Apple does, as I think a lot of us are. But I think the most exciting thing for me is, what these devices can do in the future. And I think we're just scratching the surface right now. So there's a couple spaces emerging, one in the fitness, one in the health. Us, we're a little bit more focused on fashion and communication. And there's a couple with ID that I think is really, really interesting, something that we want to explore a little bit more as well.
So do you think it's useful to kind of segment it like this? Like, it seems like people are saying Apple's going to be focusing on health. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's, we're investors here in Jawbone. There's things like Fitbit. It sounds like you have sort of a classification that...
The good news is I don't think there will be a one-size-fits-all because, again, you're talking about fashion. And even with watches... Maybe you wear one, maybe somebody has one watch that they wear all the time, but they like to change it up. They like to change, fashion changes.
So you think the average person will have multiple wearable devices?
I think so, yeah. And I think that they'll be buying devices, again, in the same sort of life cycle that they buy clothing. So when the new device comes out that season, they'll want to run and buy it. They'll want to buy the winter version, they'll want to buy the spring version, the summer version, and so on.
And so you think so maybe you'll use a health device or like a fitness device while you're running. You'll have a communication device like Ringly.
You'll have a cocktail ring for your cocktail party.
Cocktail ring for your cocktail party, and then you'll have... So you think there'll be sort of multiple like that?
Yeah.
High level, you sort of said there's fitness, there's communication. What else did you say?
ID. So
what's that?
Using your wearable as an ID. So there's another product on the market called the Nimmi Bracelet that measures your pulse and your heart rate to uniquely identify you. So that when you walk into a room, the settings sort of match, your profile, essentially. And you can use that for payments.
How does it, so it just like technically the wristband communicates with what? Your phone or with beacons?
It communicates with your phone and then any devices in your space.
I see.
So your
So
Nest,
the idea is, so
yeah.
the idea is it's Internet of Things, your Nest, your lights, everything is speaking presumably by Bluetooth or something, and your wristband comes in, IDs you, and changes the mood or the settings or something. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Unlocks your doors, things like that.
That's pretty cool. And you don't think that'll just be built into your watch or your phone?
I mean, it's all speculative right now.
Yeah.
We don't know what they're going to do, but I'd like it to be all built in.
And what if this, like one view of all this is like it's sort of gimmicky, like that. Not talking about Ringly, but let's say the Samsung watch. Like a lot of this stuff is sort of gimmicky, and is it a technology looking for an application? Do people really want to have the lighting change when they move into a room?
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. Right?
Don't we stare at our phones enough? Do we really want to have like the watch have all of your messages?
For us, it was more about solving a problem. So I think if companies take that approach, I think you're going to start to see a lot of interesting things. Again, with us, it's being less tied to your phone and being more present in situations, but getting those short bits of information that you absolutely need, as opposed to just packing something with all this functionality because you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you kind of taking to maybe just so people don't know what your device does is it lights up with different colors and vibrations depending on like if you're your boss is calling you or your kid is texting you or something, right? And so the idea is actually to reduce the information overload and not be staring at your phone the whole time. And
to be able to manage your notifications. So we're getting so many notifications right now. We're very inundated. I don't think that Apple does a great job with managing them. And so we're building a platform where you can manage all of those notifications and you deem what's most important to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think like a lot of the views, like this, if you look at the Samsung Watch, it's basically that their idea is just let's just take the phone and shrink it and remove some features and put it on your wrist, right? And
Getting back to those Dick Tracy days.
Yeah, so it really feels driven by the platform as opposed to driven by the use case, right?
Exactly, because I think big technology companies are trying to go for the platform play.
Yeah. When you go back and look at, let's take touch computing as an example. There were all these companies in the 90s Everything from the Apple Newton to there's a company called Go that raised a lot of money and was high profile. And they were excited about tablets and sort of what we do now with iPhones and things. And it turned out just to be way too early. And then actually there was probably like an opposite backlash. Everyone got very cynical about it. And a lot of people were cynical about the iPhone. And then it turned out, of course, to work fantastically well. And now it's, one of the major computing paradigms. So one question with wearables I have is, are we in the kind of 90s or in the 2000s with touch computing? Like, in other words, will this be the first wave? And it turns out because the batteries and the technology and just the platforms and things just aren't ready for it, that it's the Apple Newton, or will it turn out to be the iPhone?
I think, everyone wants to sort of make their wearable play right now. So you're seeing a lot of innovation happen. And I think that sparks a lot of creativity and makes these things possible. Again, I think we're just scratching the surface. Even if Apple comes out with something, battery technology is such that if you want to power a screen and if you want to do all these things, you need a device that's large. So with us, we made the decision to take out a screen and to communicate in other ways, to be able to make the device smaller and more discreet. So I think, it's similar to how a lot of these products that are coming out that are designed a little bit, more masculine or use a lot of plastic parts. And that part reminds me of the early 90s when websites first came out. Yeah. And, websites just weren't designed well. And now finally people are designing things that are beautiful. And I think that's an important part too that we're missing.
Well, it's also like a lot of these things have kind of system-wide network effects. And what I mean by that is it could turn out that just having a watch today is like sort of cool. But when you have a watch, and by the way, everything around us is also networked. Our lights are, our thermostat is, other people are. We have beacons everywhere. You have software tying it all together. It could be that that you kind of need a lot of those pieces together to make the thing useful, right?
Exactly.
So. It's sort of like it's a lot like the internet in the sense of if you were the first person to have a computer and your friend had a computer, it's kind of cool because you can send each other files. But it's a lot more interesting when everyone has one, and then developers come and create new interesting things. I always think about like in the internet, if you went back to 1993 or something, people and you asked them what you do when you network computers, they would sort of say the examples they give were things you did prior to the internet. So they would say you could copy files and you could send email and things that they were used to doing with two computers tied together. And then, of course, it took 10 plus years for people to invent Wikipedia and Twitter and YouTube and all these other great things. And similarly, like what will probably happen, I think, with wearables is like wearables, you have internet things, all these things will kind of come together. You'll start to lay the groundwork. There'll be certain early adopter use cases. But then what will be really exciting is when the developers come.
Once you have that network effect.
Once you have that network effect, then the developers come and they start inventing all this crazy stuff, which, of course, we can't think of now because it took 10 years of the internet to even come up with a lot of these things, right? It's just you need to have it out there and the whole thing develop and have lots of smart people thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's definitely happening. You can just feel it with all these new devices that are being built and everything becoming smarter. I mean, from your thermostat to your coffee pot to your rings. Yeah, back to the network effect, the way I see it is there's these sort of four pillars that wearables can connect to. One, they can connect to your devices, so your phone. And they, anything that comes through, any notifications that come through on your phone, you can pass them to your device. Similarly, you can take action on your device and pass it back to the phone. The second one is the self. So wearables can connect to your body. There's biosensors that can, test your mood or how many steps you've taken. And then wearables can also connect to other people. So if I'm wearing a wearable and you're wearing a wearable, we can essentially know that we're in the same vicinity of each other and communicate with each other and whatnot. And then the fourth one, which I think is the most interesting, is that it can connect to your physical space as well. So like we were talking about before, you walk into a room and it's, the music starts playing your favorite station, or your coffee starts, your lights go up, and your physical space can adapt to you. Similarly, you can also, one of the things that I'm interested in beacons is when you walk into a physical space, you can now get more data on people and more information. So if you think about e-commerce, there's so much data that we were collecting, when I used to work at eBay, about people that you just don't have when you go into a physical store. Yeah. So you can see what people are buying, what sizes they are, what colors they like, whatnot. But when somebody walks into a store, you have no idea of their behaviors or what they're doing. So now we're going to be able to capture all this information to then target customers and better their experiences later on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've met a few companies recently who were doing basically temperature control inside of large companies using people's iPhones. So it turns out that, if a room is empty, obviously you don't need to cool or heat it as much. And then basically the way it works, everyone puts in their kind of temperature preference on their phone, and then it figures out, okay, the 10 people are here, here's the optimal temperature. But it turns out you can save, it's like some astounding number, like 20% of energy use using that. And
imagine doing that automatically.
Well, yeah, and they're doing it now with security. And so actually it might be a case where the enterprise applications lead the consumer ones, because in the enterprise, the company can control the whole network, right? They can reconfigure the whole building at once. They can go and give everyone badges and iPhones. And so we're starting to see that sort of on the security level. And on
even on the fitness side, I heard insurance companies are giving everybody Fitbits and Jawbones.
No, that's in fact. So like when we got acquired by eBay was giving everyone Fitbit. So it turns out if you're a large company that has, I think it's over 500 employees, those companies always actually self-insure, meaning they pay for their own. Like you may see a Blue Cross thing on your card, but actually eBay is paying the bill, not an insurance company. And so there's a strong economic incentive for them to make their workforce healthier.
So you think eBay gave Fitbits to?
I think it was like partly to be kind of cool, trendy thing, but partly, there is a real, long-term financial incentive for them to make make people healthier, and
but imagine that just people walk out of a room and the lights go off. I'm sure that can save a lot of energy.
I think there's a reasonable chance that you'll see the corporate use cases leading. Unlike what we've seen over the last 15 years in technology, which is the consumer has led the enterprise. Your stuff you have at home on your iPhone and Gmail is much better than stuff you have at work. It may be that with wearables you see the enterprise cases leading, just because the enterprise can control everything, right?
Yeah, same with Google Glass. I can foresee a lot of really strong enterprise use cases.
Yeah, there's already some use cases around. So basically, if you think of it as there's these cases where people are repairing oil rigs, and you're looking through the glass and you're seeing a blueprint of what you're supposed to be doing, and somebody on the other side who's an expert on repairing that is watching the video. They're also using it in like medical use cases like that.
Yeah,
so it's like you can basically have somebody who's like super experienced looking through your eyes and giving you guidance on what to do. It's also cool that you have things like Kickstarter now, right? So that it used to be that just people like us, venture capitalists, were the kind of gatekeepers. And now you have so many other sources of kind of where these things can spring up, right?
Exactly.
You raise a little bit of VC money, but not like less than, $1 million or so.
Yep.
And then funding the rest of it through pre-sales. And a lot of in that, and you were sort of, you are probably at the heavy end of the spectrum in terms of raising money, but a lot of these things just went straight to Kickstarter.
Exactly. And hardware, is expensive.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be able to prototype. Especially, for us, it was particularly expensive because we want to make a device that's really, really, really small. So manufacturing these things, every time we get a board built, it'll be $8,000. So you do need a lot of capital to be able to do that, but it's definitely much easier now than it's ever been.
It's also, you can sell directly, right? Like, you're selling everything directly.
We're selling directly from our site
Which is, I think if people that haven't done retail business before don't really, retail takes 50%.
Yeah, more.
Which dramatically changes the possibilities. You can't, which means if you want to sell your product for $150, you got to be able to make it for $75. You get rid of retail, you can suddenly spend almost twice as much money building it, right?
Right, and you don't need the enormous volumes that you used to get your costs down. You can sell something without going to retail on your own site for a decent cost.
Okay, we're out of time. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.